Welcome back, everybody, to First Round Frenzy. Matt Laguza, Cole Noble here again, continuing the path to the draft with our positional analysis. Today, wide receivers and corners. We're going to do our top seven of each position. Cole, we're going to start off with you with your number seven wide receiver. But first of all, what do you think of these two position groups and how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for asking.
Oh, of
Hope
course.
you're doing good. Um, yeah, I think if you talk about either of these two positions, the conversation starts with Travis Hunter. We're gonna, I believe, just talk about him in terms of corner. That's what he's going at the combine. So that's probably the best thing to go with right now, just because he's such a unique player that the league pretty much has never seen. So I'm fine starting off things. Or not starting off things here, but just mentioning like, yeah, like when you talk about either of these two positions, the conversation starts with Travis Hunter because he is going to be the first corner off the board or first wide receiver off the board, depending on how you look at him, just because of how unique of a player he is. And this is the time we need to talk about him.
Yeah, I mean Travis Hunter. So many people have different opinions on him. We all know he's going to be a top five pick in this draft, probably top four. Just depending on what quarterbacks do. But some people have him as the best receiver in this class. Some people have him as the best corner. Some people think he's like a round three corner if he just played corner. So there's a lot of differing opinions on him. We're going to go, as you mentioned, with him as a corner, just based on the combine designation. Um, that doesn't mean we think he's a better corner or a better or a worse receiver. We're just going based on the combine designation. But let's get
Yeah.
started with the wide receivers. Cole, who is your wide receiver seven?
Okay, so since we're doing top seven, I'll start with my seven. And I have Isaiah Bond. You're gonna roll your eyes. I got a Texas guy that low. I know
No,
you
no, no,
got
that's
Texas
fine.
guys
I
might
had
be
him.
top
I had much
five.
lower. I had much lower. Okay.
Oh wow. Okay. I know you're also a Matthew Golden fan. I mean, we
Yeah.
had Golden pretty high in in our first round mock draft, but I like Bond's speed. He's not Xavier Worthy.
No.
I don't want to make those comparisons, even though they're both coming out of Texas, but I do like Bond's, explosive down the field speed. I think this year, again, a Texas wide receiver gets the fastest 40 at the position group. I think Bond does it, but I don't, he's not going to touch, the record that
No.
Xavier Worthy, got last season. But I do think that Isaiah Bond is a big play machine down the field, and that's going to entice a lot of teams in this draft in the second round. And I think the big thing for him is creating separation without his speed, and especially his work in traffic. I think there's some limitations there. He has a lot of body catches. He doesn't really try to extend beyond his frame and, attack the football with his hands. And, that leads to some issues when, he's in some tight situations, contested catch opportunities, and those can hold him back in his game, from what I saw on the tape.
Yeah, I mean, I like Isaiah Ron. I'm not saying anything poorly about him. I definitely like Matthew Golden better than him personally. But he's one of the guys that I haven't watched as much film on over the past few weeks. He's probably in my 10 to 15 range, somewhere there. But solid player with good speed. I do like him as kind of like a late day two, early day three kind of guy. But, opinions change. So my wide receiver seven, we talked about him actually in the mock draft, and that is Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. He's moved down my board just a little bit. Again, I think there's going to be a lot of changing, especially through my five to around eight or nine. But really like what I saw out of him from the Senior Bowl. Looked really good, good release. Doesn't have that top end speed that you probably would like in a wide receiver these days, but great release, great physicality, great body control, and able to adjust himself midair. We saw that on the touchdown pass from Ollie Gordon in the Senior Bowl game. We talk about him and Jalen Noel. I believe you like Jalen Noel better than Jaden Higgins. Again, Jalen Noel is probably one of my honorable mentions that we'll talk about later on. But I just really like the size and the physicality. And it's not like he has bad speed. He still has the ability to get up and beat a corner if he needs to. He just doesn't have that top end speed that you'd like, which is why he's close to my 7, 8, 9 range rather than into my top five.
Yeah, I like Higgins. I like you said, I do personally like Noel, more out of the same school, but we'll get to him. I have Noel in my honorable mentions, and actually I have Higgins a lot higher.
Oh,
That's
really?
just where I have him now. It's not personal, if I were a GM ranking, who I would target at, certain parts in the draft, I, would much rather wait and get a guy like Noel. But I feel like Higgins is going to come off the board um, first out of the two. But I have Trey Harris next out of Ole Miss. I think he's your ideal X prototype at the wide receiver position. Strong red zone threat, the fades, the mismatches, all those things using size to his advantage really worked out well for him. And I thought on in breaking routes, he was a beast in terms of catching the ball in an in breaking route and then moving after the catch and getting away from defenders. Dominated both man and zone coverages. I don't know if you've seen. I'll have to try to send it to you. There's a spreadsheet that was like yards per route run, I believe, against man and zone coverages, and it's like Trey Harris in the top corner,
I'm
and
pretty
no
sure I
one,
saw that.
no
Yeah.
one even, yeah, no one even close to him. He's got a lot of high IQ, some nuance in his route running, but I don't think there's a lot of like elite at one talent. He doesn't have elite speed. He doesn't have the elite size, the elite route running, but it's a lot of good at all the different things. And I put Michael Thomas, I mean, he's not quite that level of a player. I'm not saying he's gonna be, a potential guy that, is a record-breaking player and becomes, as high of a draft pick as Michael Thomas was. Um, Actually, I mean, he was only a second round pick,
Yeah.
Michael Thomas, 47th overall. So, I mean, I could see, that same kind of range for Trey Harris. But just a guy where he wasn't ever elite, at one category. Michael Thomas never really, in my opinion, was an elite guy outside of the one season where he just caught every pass that thrown to him on a slant route and broke a record because of it. But just very good at all the different little things where he's just an all-around polished receiver that, is going to be in the second round, but play for a good amount of years.
Yeah, I really like Trey Harris. He's actually higher up on my board. So talk about him in a little bit. Um, so now we get to one of my guys in this year's class. A lot of people I think have him lower. We'll see where if you have him at all. But that's Pat Bryant out of Illinois. Really like what I saw from him on the tape. 6'3", a little bit over 200 pounds. So really good size. He again, it's very similar to Jaden Higgins. They're kind of interchangeable for me right now, where he doesn't have the top end speed, but an elite release, can high point the football, probably has the best catch radius outside of Tatora McMillan in this class. Really like what I saw out of him. Almost 1,000 yards this past season and 10 touchdowns with an Illinois team that played pretty well this year and is going to be going up. And he brought them a lot of production this year. So it's going to be interesting to see how they figure it out without him. But he's one of my favorite guys in this class. He's just sure hand, low drop rate, can make tough catches, good body control. He's going to be a guy that probably goes in the middle ish of day two. He's going to be a great value pick for a team that goes out and gets him. But I think he could potentially be a very impactful X wide receiver once you get to the NFL level.
Nice, good pull. I'll have to check him out. He wasn't on my list, so you definitely stumped me on that one. So I'll check him out, see what we can do. I don't watch much Illinois football for good reason. But they did have a good year this year, so I'll look at it. My next one though, Washington State. I did watch Washington State football, and Kyle Williams the last couple, I mean, pretty much days. I mean, he's quickly rising up my personal,
Yep.
favorites of this position. So I have him in my top five. I might be too high on that right now just because it's recency bias when I was watching him, but it pushed Jalen Noel off my top seven list, moving him up the board. But he was charted as the fastest wide receiver at the Senior Bowl. Take what you want from that and how accurate that can be. We'll see next week at the combine. But I think this guy's a yak machine. I mean, PFF charted him with 20 broken tackles. He made defenders look absolutely silly after the catch. And overall, I thought like the physicality he can improve on. And that's why, once we get closer to the draft, I'll start, probably bringing him back down to speed in my rankings and down a little bit. But, the blocking can be a lot better in the run game and the physicality. But when I was watching him and making plays, I was like, God, this guy's just making everybody miss, and like no one can bring this guy down. So I started taking notice of him as of late, and he's just rising up there. I probably just need to take my personal bias aside and try to level out this rankings even better next time around.
Yeah, no, I love Kyle Williams. He's just outside. He's probably my 8 or 9 wide receiver, maybe 10. He's between 8 and 10. I watched a lot of Washington State football this year just because I love John Mateer. He's going to be one of my favorite quarterbacks whenever he comes out, either next year or the year after. Um, really disappointed he went to Oklahoma. That sucks. But going to be excited to watch him. Anyway, my wide receiver five is Luther Burden out of Missouri. I think Luther Burden is a guy that is very it's no one has a clear insight on what he's going to be. I think we all understand that he's most likely going to play in the slot. He's physical, shifty, can make people miss. But there's been a lot of inconsistency in his production. Does it have to do with Missouri's quarterback situation over the past few years? Probably a little bit, but I'm not entirely sold on him being a number one wide receiver for a team. I think he's probably going to be in that wide receiver two range, gadget guy that can, he can play out wide, mostly going to be effective out of the slot. Um, I don't get that top three wide receiver vibe out of him right now, which is why I have him at number five. But I really like his ability in open space, and he's a good physical player. He's on the shorter side of that physical range at 5'11. But overall, he's a solid player. Do I think he's one of the best in the draft? Maybe not, but he's still good enough that he's going to make a solid impact at the next level.
Okay, we'll have some disagreements there. I'll get around to Luther Burden in a
Okay.
minute because I do have him higher on my list. But now is where I have the Jaden Higgins, spot here at number four.
Okay.
I think this guy's got an incredible wingspan and like the catch radius is incredible. This guy will catch anything, anywhere it's thrown to him. He's coming down with the football, can go up high for it, which makes him unstoppable in the red zone. But I mean, just you put the ball anywhere near this guy, he's gonna come down with the football. He played inside, played in the slot, played outside. That's going to be good from versatility standpoint. I think he's going to be a very reliable number two wide receiver where he's got great hands. He's going to come down with the football. He's not going to be your big play option as your number one, but I think as a very dependable wide receiver too. This is a guy that is going to make a lot of teams very happy once they get him. I think he even could make it into the back end of the first round. I mean, we saw a lot of receivers squeak into the back end of the first round last year. Worthy got in there. Keon Coleman almost, I believe, got in there at the late in the first round.
I
Um,
believe so. Or no, they traded out of the first round and ended up getting him early second, I think.
yeah, still like into the first round. Oh yeah, so Pearsall and Leggett came in at the end of the first round, and then Worthy. And then you had Keon Coleman first pick of the second round.
Yep.
So yeah, like that range, like beginning third round or beginning second round into first round, I think with a good combine showing, Higgins can establish himself in one of those spots right there.
Yeah. As we had him in around that range in the mock draft. I believe we had him going to the Bills for that one, if I remember correctly. But
Hmm.
I think he's going to be a solid contributor at the next level. We know that, where does he go? We'll see. I think there's a lot of differing opinions in this draft class on this wide receiver position, but he's very solid overall. Now, my number four wide receiver, we've already talked about him a little bit, and that's Matthew Golden, teammate of Isaiah Bond. Golden, he's flown up draft boards the past few weeks. We've been hearing a lot about him as potentially a top 20 pick. We had him going to the Cowboys at number 12. I made that selection. I'm a little less sure of it now. I don't think they're going to go wide receiver, just based on some things that I've been hearing. But overall, really, really solid player. He's not the biggest guy. He doesn't have the biggest catch radius, but he's twitchy. He's explosive. He's got great hands. He's going to be one of the best route runners in this class. And he's very versatile. He can line up in the slot. He can line up outside. He can be your X or your Z there. And he's just going to be very productive. He was Texas's best wide receiver this past season. He had 58 receptions and almost 1,000 yards, as well as 9 touchdowns. And he's going to be a weapon no matter where you are in the field, whether, third and long, in the red zone, just typical need a first down, first and 10. He's going to make something happen. He's going to get open. And when you throw it to him, he's going to make the catch. So I think just by the consistency of the way he plays and his ability to get open is what makes him so valuable, which is why I have him at number 4.
Yeah, I just had him off my list just because I thought he didn't do as much after the catch as I would have liked. Yeah, he was consistent getting the ball and making some plays, but just like that the next step of being, getting the ball and then running with it, making plays after the catch, beating defenders, either physically or with his speed, those kinds of things. I thought like he kept had a bit of frustrating drops in my opinion watching him that isn't a knock on his consistency as a pass catcher, but just some things that were like put into his frame and you're like, oh, like when you're watching it because he can do it and then it happens and you're like, oh man, just one of those things is you know Matthew Golden, probably by the end of the process, I'll catch back up to him and be somewhere around where you are once you said you're going to try to knock him down a little bit potentially by the end of it versus where you had him during our mock draft. So maybe we come to a similar ground by that point, and once I get some more work on him. But I usually let you get the Texas guys. I know you like watching it a lot more than I do. I didn't want to watch Quinn Ewers throw the
Yeah,
rock.
yeah,
Um,
that hasn't been a fun film watch, I'll tell you that.
So what are we at? Three, top three.
Yep.
So we'll probably have the same number three, I think. I got Emeka Ebuka. You might have him two.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got him three. This guy's always been overshadowed at Ohio State, which is an absolute wide receiver factory. I mean, the guy they had come in, what was it, the freshman below him this year that just absolutely dominated.
Jeremiah, yeah.
Yeah, like this was supposed to be Amika's year, and then Jeremiah came out and just flat out dominated the opponents. So, but I still think, he's very much on his way to being a first round pick and, should be within the top 32 selections, even despite being overshadowed at that school throughout his career, because he still finished as one of the most productive wide receivers in Ohio State football history.
Yeah.
And we know what kind of players came out of that program. I think it's a very elite very elite route runner, can cut on a dime, can accelerate, after breaks, in and out of his breaks. He's got big size, works out of after the catch really well. He's going to be a very good power slot
Yep.
because that's usually where they played him at Ohio State, and he was big for a slot player. But we're seeing some of those teams shift into a power slot role, and Jackson Smith and Jigba did that role in Ohio State, and then made himself a first round pick, and a consistent starter for the Seattle Seahawks. And then Amon St. Brown, what he's done since being snubbed in the draft and fell all the way to the Lions, and being able to prove his production year after year with the Lions as a power slot. I think Emeka is the next player in that you know, style of wide receiver to come in and just be a consistent, productive player out of the slot for a team.
Yeah. I've got him at two. I'll talk about him as soon as I get to that. But I mean, he's creeping up to potentially being wide receiver one, in my opinion. Like I have always liked Amika. But again, I'll get into that in a few minutes. But my wide receiver three, you already talked about him. That's Trey Harris. I love Trey Harris. He doesn't do anything elite, as you mentioned. He's not, he doesn't have elite speed. He doesn't have elite physicality, but he is very good at everything he does. I mean, if you give him a full workload, I mean, I don't remember the exact numbers, but if he played all season without the injury issues that he had at different points this year, I think the projection was like 1,600 yards and like 15 touchdowns or something like that, which is ridiculous. And it probably would have helped Jackson Dart move up boards as well, if that. But I love his height, 6'2", 210 pounds, big, physical. He's going to play on the outside. He's a good route runner. He's got good hands. He's got a good catch radius. He's, again, outside of McMillan, he's probably, and maybe Jaden Higgins, he's probably one of the best red zone threats in this class. Just really good at high pointing the football, can make quick separation. I really like him. Again, it just, with a lot of these guys, it just comes down to the speed. And we're going to see that at the combine. What do these guys run? And if they run decent, they're going to get pulled off early because I think a lot of them have really good traits. It's just the speed factor. And that's what's going to determine whether these guys go early or not. But I firmly believe Trey Harris is going to be a starting wide receiver in the NFL and be a very productive player.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure he's going to move up my board the more I watch him just because, like I said, like he has everything that's there without like the top traits. But,
Yep.
like everything is right there, like good to great. And it's not exceptional, but like it's that blend of all of those different things is going to entice some teams when they start looking into them. So into the top two, I got Luther Burden top two.
Okay.
I
Yep.
got it on number two. You were a little bit lower on him, but I think ever since day one, coming into Missouri, as a former five-star recruit, he has been a high-level producer year after year. I mean, he took a little bit of a step back from 2023, but kind of bounced back in 2024 and just at number one threat. I think he is that level of a player. I think in terms of his first step off the line of scrimmage, he can beat corners just off that alone. He's got very good body control. He can, track balls downfield really well as a downfield threat. And I think he elevates a run game. That's what I love about him. Watching the run plays and being a willing blocker and holding his own against corners or even, getting to that second level and sometimes blocking safeties as well. I wonder if he can run a faster 40, and maybe that's what really blows him away as being a top pick in this draft is, he hasn't shown the elite speed on tape, but if he gets a good time at the 40-yard dash next week at the combine, I think that really solidifies it on some teams' boards of, yeah, he can be potentially one of those guys.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think for me with Luther Burden is for me, he seems like a gadget player. He doesn't seem like he's going to be that elite guy that you can count on no matter what. Um, but you never know. I think, he's a very solid player. He's got good physicality. He's got good hands. I just don't know if he's going to be the guy in someone's offense. I would love to see him in Denver. I would love to see
Mhm.
him in potentially Pittsburgh, the way that they sometimes like in the Deontay Johnson role when he was there. I kind of like those kind of situations I like him in. So we'll see where he goes. But if he goes to a team that says, hey, you're going to be our number one guy, we need you to play outside at least 50% of the snaps. I don't know if he's going to be that guy. But, again, as you said, we got a lot more film to catch up on, and we'll see. I might watch a game and just see something, and it just bumps up my board. But right now,
Mhm.
that's why he's just a little bit lower than the top three.
Yeah, I'm trying to go back and see where we slotted him at in our mock draft.
Was it
Um,
Atlanta? Or no, you said
yeah,
Bruins. Or was it Atlanta? It might have been Atlanta.
it was Atlanta. Yeah.
Okay.
It was Atlanta. So yeah, I think he just if he gets with a really good offensive coordinator or offensive minded head coach, like that can really take his game to the next level because I think this guy can be a nightmare matchup
Yep.
if you scheme him the right way and like yeah, it's a gadget. Like Sean Payton, if he somehow falls to Denver, that would be incredible. Playing with Sean Payton's offense, he would get him in position. He's already talked on record about wanting a gadget
Yep.
weapon in his offense.
And if
It's
Loveland and
kind of
Warren are gone at that point,
yeah, kind of a loosely
perfect.
mind like a loosely idea of what that means. Everyone's like, oh, he wants Ashton Genty, he wants a big a weapon running back, and some are like, oh, he wants so and so like Tyler Warren, he wants a weapon gadget tight end. I don't know exactly what he means by that, but I do think that Luther Burden kind of fits that tab in my opinion, potentially looking at it from the outside, of just being a gadget, like you said, but just a nightmare matchup guy where you put him in, opportune situations to win with him, but it's not going to be like a consistent, go-to target.
Yeah, 100%. All right, my number two, already talked about it a little bit, Emeka Egbuka. I love what I've seen from him throughout his entire career at Ohio State. He's always kind of been overshadowed from Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, Marvin Harrison Jr., now Jeremiah Smith. But he is just always there getting things done. He's
Mhm.
sure-handed. He's got really good speed. He's great route runner. He's one of my favorite players after the catch. His ability to do anything. And he's also very similar to Luther Burden, really good gadget guy. You're going to give it to him on jet sweeps. You're going to be able to give it to him on little flick forward passes and just let him do whatever he can with the ball. And that's the kind of guy that you're getting is just give it to him and he's going to make something happen. So
Mhm.
really like him. You've already gone into a little bit of detail on him already, so I'm not going to go too crazy here, but love the player he is. He's as much as I love who's probably both of our number one receivers at this point, um, he is creeping up on that number one spot. I think just based on his ability with the ball in his hand and his route running ability. But Cole, I'll let you start off. Who is both of our number one wide receivers in this class?
Yeah, it's easily Ted McMillan. This guy is going to be a top 10 selection. I think there's honestly a high gap between him and anyone else in this class. And this guy screams alpha number one receiver to me, watching him on the tape. The way that he can, like, first of all, the size is off the charts. He's always been an elite athlete. No, those two boxes already checked. But what he can do with, out the killer speed that some receivers have, but still being able to stack defenders downfield, come down with the catch, and be able to create separation down the field without that speed is impressive and what you want out of your alpha wide receiver. And the way he contorts mid route and also in air to catch footballs was that's not normal. I was watching some of the plays he was making and I was like, holy crap. Like it's ridiculous. Some of the balls he was coming down with and the plays he was able to make, like while still running his route and the ways he was able to move his body and come down with catches.
Yeah. I mean, I love Tet. And again, I think the one downside with him is speed, which we've talked about with a lot of these guys, top end speed. And also, I'm not entirely convinced by his route running ability. I think he lacks that. And once he goes up against NFL corners, where, he's probably going to be a team's number one. So if he goes up against a team's number one corner, I am a little bit concerned on his ability to create separation, but he's a physical beast. I mean,
Hmm
6'5", almost 220 pounds. I mean, if you look at this, in his last two seasons, 90 receptions, 1,400 yards, 10 touchdowns. And 2024, 84 receptions, 1,300 yards, 8 touchdowns. I mean, he's an animal. He's a red zone threat. I think he's probably a better, not better version, a more athletic version of what Drake London was coming out of school a few years ago. I mean, I see a lot of people throwing out the Mike Evans comparison over the past few weeks. I don't know if it's there. I think Mike Evans is a little bit more well-rounded than Tet is. Love what I see out of him. I mean, I see some people having him drop all the way to the Bucks. Imagine if their replacement for Chris Godwin is
Just
McMillan. They
another
got him
Mike
at
Evans.
19. I mean, come on. That would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
He's
I
got a
don't think
lot
he
of,
even falls that far.
if he falls that, I mean, I had him going to the Patriots in our mock draft at number 4. So, there's a lot of different places he can go. Really talented guy. Again, for me, it's just the route running is because his physicality and his high pointing was able to get him through it in college. Will he be able to do it up against, some of the best corners in the NFL? I don't know if it's going to get him out of as many separations issues as it is in college. So we'll see what happens. But, he's a top 2 receiver in this class, in my opinion. No question.
Yeah, and I think day one he's going to absolutely supercharge an offense, and that's why I think he's going to go to one of these lesser teams early in the draft. I mean, a New England Patriots, a Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, I even like him going to Jacksonville and putting Brian Thomas in the slot and telling Christian Kirk to kick rocks and just cut ties with that contract because I
Christian
thought that was
Christian
a
Kirk is
horrible.
going to Washington. He's joining Kingsbury again. That's happening.
I thought that was a horrible signing from day one, and it still has never paid out for Jacksonville. But Jacksonville is an option. I mean, Carolina, the Saints,
I
potentially
like
an
the
option. I
Saints.
mean,
I like the Saints.
yeah, it depends on how these teams view the position and how big of a need they think it is for their team. But he's going to supercharge whatever of these, lesser offenses and come in and, help them get to that next level.
All right, let's quickly go through some honorable mentions here at the position before we move on to corners. We'll just do it real quickly. We already talked about some of them. I told you Isaiah Bond is kind of like in my 10 to 15 range. I like Kyle Williams. He was just outside. Jack Betch, none of us talked about. He had a
Yeah,
really
he is
good
close.
call. He was really close for me. And the one guy that we didn't talk about, and that's Jackson Meeks out of Syracuse. Really like what he's done. I think he was a great weapon for Kyle McCord when he was there. But I think those are like the guy. You can start going. I'll see if I've got anybody else, but I think that's pretty much.
Yeah, I had Tez Johnson on there too as one of
Oh
my
yeah,
honorable
Ted.
mentions. We all know the story by now of him and Bo Nix and how close they are. Everyone wants them to reunite in Denver, but I think he's got some pretty underrated speed. I think he could, get below the 4.3s at the combine, which would be really good for his performance down in Indianapolis. And I thought he did really good at contested catches for his size too. I mean, all the comps being out there, throwing out the Tank Dell names, Tank Dell comparisons. I don't think he's as good as Tank Dell, immediately out of the gate, but I think this guy can be a baller and showed that nonetheless on the tape from what he can do at his size.
Yeah. So we'll move on to corners. But the only other two guys that I just want to mention throughout there, Alec Manor out of Stanford, really good
Yeah, he
physical
was like
wide
close on mine
receiver.
too.
Yep. And then Savion Williams, the other TCU guy. I just think the way he contorts his body to make catches is ridiculous. We'll see if he's got the rest of the game, but I really like him too.
Yeah, and Jalen Noel, I know I mentioned him earlier, but
Yeah.
I mean, this guy is like Keenan Allen's little brother.
Oh,
I mean, he's not as big as Keenan Allen, but like the way his feet can move and how intelligent he is at finding soft spots and how sure-handed he is, like it's like you're watching, a smaller Keenan Allen operating at the college level. So I've always liked Jalen Noel. I had to throw him out there. He's gonna get back up in that top seven for me pretty soon.
oh yeah, no. I mean, he's going to be an 80 plus reception kind of guy at the next level. He's going to be a big
Yeah.
time player. Now we are going to move on to the cornerbacks. Uh, Honestly, I think this is very top heavy position here. There's a lot of really good quality at the top end. We'll get pretty much right into this. Cole, who's your number seven corner?
Yeah, like real quick, usually I like the idea of every year you come out of the draft, no matter what, with a corner.
Yep.
The position's just too important. There's too many injuries at the position, and you always want to have a reliable stable of cornerbacks. And this year, like you said, it's so top heavy. When I'm trying to look at these later round corners, I usually, try to pick out and pluck from the pool. I'm not finding those kinds of guys this year. I'm trying really hard to, but it's like you said, very top heavy. So with that being said, at number seven, I do have Jalen Smith out of USC.
Oh, okay.
He recently joined my list. I think, looking at it, he played everywhere at USC. He played in the slot, he played both safety positions, he played outside, and that's kind of where he landed for the rest of the season was outside cornerback. I think in terms of like a situational corner, he's the one I like in the mid rounds to try to get and use him very well at what he does best, which is mixing up the style at the line of scrimmage. He's very calm no matter who's in front of him. He can jab, he can press. He's got twitchy hips. Anything you like, at the line of scrimmage. He's a bit undersized, and already shown some issues covering bigger wide receivers. But I think in terms of like as a slot nickel short yardage guy, like he was insane against the run for his size and being willing to just get in there and get in on the tackles. That kind of gear and motor in him, and then I'm just gonna say the dog in him is gonna appease a lot of teams once he starts falling down the board and the draft continues on.
Yeah, he's a guy I have not watched. So that's
Yeah,
gonna be
watch
one
some
of the
Jalen
guys
Smith.
I'm gonna have to watch some of his. Now, for me, my cornerback number seven is a guy that also just recently moved into my list. It was really between him, this guy, and Trey Amos out of Ole Miss, and I just squeaked Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State into my number seven spot.
Mm,
Another under
Wildcat.
another undersized guy that you mentioned. He's about 5'10", but his ball skills are insane. He's really sticky guy in coverage. He can play man to man. He can play in zone. He's a guy that can also very versatile. He can play in the nickel. Great in the run game. What I like out of a corner, which is ironic since I love Sauce Gardner, is I love a guy that can tackle. Like I love a guy that's just going to get down and dirty and make a play when he needs to. And Jacob Parrish is that kind of guy. When I was watching, what I like to do sometimes is just go in right before I watch film, is go and watch a highlight tape of some of these guys because I like to stay optimistic about them. And I go in and I just see this guy laying people out. Big guys, small guys, no matter what. And he's like, he suplexed someone into the ground. And I absolutely love that. He's probably a cornerback two ceiling kind of guy, is what I think he can probably get to. But he's going to be locked down against that guy. Really like what I saw out of the film.
Yeah, he was just out on mine. I mean, Jalen Smith came in and pushed him out because I usually like my K-State Wildcats, and watching Jalen Smith get in there, just pushed him out of my list. But the next one I have is Trey Amos, who you put
Okay.
out of your list
Yep.
for him. I thought he was solid in terms of man and zone. He had good versatility at both. He moved around a lot. Everyone's going to talk about going from Louisiana to Bama, settling in Ole Miss there at the end of his career. I thought he was pretty scrappy against the run, and also kind of like against the pass, like disrupting receivers with his hands, then being able to drop back in the zone. He did a good job of that. He can't let that become a consistent thing at the NFL because they're going to call that a lot more. especially like once you get past the 5 yard mark and getting some holdings or getting some pass interference calls. You can't let that scrappiness be an issue with this game in terms of you know you know pass defense and the IQ athleticism. I thought he can maybe jump some more routes. I think if he gets with a good coordinator, maybe he lands in Dallas potentially. They already got two corners, but I'm
Yep.
just thinking, off head like a zone heavy system that prioritizes an opportunistic corner. I think having a guy like this where he can disrupt the receivers at the line of scrimmage, bounce back in the zone, and then kind of jump some passes. I think a system like that can work best for him and try to bring out the best in what his game can offer.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see him in Dallas. I mean, I was actually just thinking about this earlier when I was going through this list. I already talked about how, I don't think Dallas is going to go wide receiver. They could be a team that end up going for one of these top corners that we end up talking about with their pick at 12, depending on how things shake up there. Diggs has not been locked down since his elite season that he had there. I forget which receiver. They've got one that's going to be a free agent this year as well, a corner, I believe. So that's going to be a position to need. So I do like the fit there for Trey Amos, but it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing with pick 12.
Yeah. And him and Bland, Trayvon and Deron Bland both have injury concerns too,
Yep.
even when they're on the field. So I think he's a good second round target for Dallas. I don't know if 12's a little too rich for me, but second round definitely.
Yeah. All right. Now for my number six, we've got Chavon Revel out of ECU. He's a guy that's been kind of bouncing around for me in this like second half of the top 10 corners for me. I think he's got great length. He's a sticky corner. I think the competition has been a little bit light. We haven't seen him go up against too many NFL caliber wide receivers over his few years. But he's a great competitor. Another guy that just really good in the run game. I mean, when you watch the film, you see him blocking kicks on special teams. You see him sacking the quarterback. You see him stuffing the running back. And you see him just going up with one hand and high pointing a football behind his back, like 7, 8 feet in the air. So
Yeah.
he's a great athlete, good ball skills, physical. The question is, will he be able to go up and lock down some of the best receivers in the NFL? I don't know, but he can definitely be a high level cornerback too, against a more physical style wide receiver. But I really like what I saw out of him out of the tape so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be a little bit higher on him than
Okay.
you, and I'm going to have him over your Texas guy 'cause that's what I have next is Jahdae Barron. Sorry, I do have him at my 5 spot. Still top five though. I
Yep.
think he's a limitless player though. The same thing I said about Jalen Smith playing all over the secondary. I think Barron is that same way, but he does it with a much higher motor and has the size you like at the position to be able to do that. He always puts himself in the right situation, always right there on the ball, always where he needs to be. And I think the best trait for Jade is he can line up on anybody. He was lining up on tight ends. He was lining up on big receivers, fast receivers and doing it at a high level. I think the potential is through the roof with that guy, and you can fit him on pretty much any defensive scheme because of what he was able to show at Texas.
Yeah. I actually don't have him too much higher. I've got him at number 4, so I'll talk about him in a little bit. Um,
Okay.
I really do like Jade. Anyway, my number 5 is a guy that we've talked about a little bit, and that's Maxwell Harrison out of Kentucky. He's a guy that I would like to have higher. I'll tell you in my big board when that comes out, he'll be cornerback 4, just because I consider Travis Hunter an athlete in that, because I feel like you need to consider both corner and wide receiver there when you're actually ranking them against other positions. But he's no question great athlete, good size, 6'1, 185, great ball skills, played in the SEC, so went up against a lot of high quality talent while he was there. Really smart player as well. He's got good speed as well. He's explosive player. Really like what I saw out of him. He's probably going to be a late first round guy, in my opinion. I think he's got the ability to be there. I saw some people mocking him to your Green Bay Packers, going corner again. Could be an interesting fit. But I think he's got the potential to be a number 1 corner in the league and lock down some of the best players.
Nice. Yeah, off my list again. Good pull.
All right.
My number 4, I do have Siobhan Revel.
Okay.
I'm much more higher on him. I know when you took and our mock draft, you took Barron 22 to the Chargers, and I kind of like had a reaction to it because I personally feel like Siobhan's a better player, and then it
Okay.
came back around at 29 to me, and I had the Washington Commanders, and I took him because I was like, yeah, this is a great fit for him, and he's still on the board. And what's interesting is another player, I think you have him higher, I have him higher too, but we did not take Benjamin Morrison until late in the
I've got
first
him high.
round.
Yeah,
But
he shot up my board since the mock draft because I didn't watch a lot of him before that, but
yeah, and
because
we'll
of the
talk about some
injury,
of
I
the
kept him out, and now
yeah, we'll talk about some of the limitations once we get to
yeah,
them. But I thought Siobhan had insane speed. I mean, it's very valuable for a cornerback because he was able to stick with anyone down the field. And like you said, the ball skills were insane. Being able to high point the football, one hand behind his back, all the things you were talking about. And I think he's tall, he's lanky, and that matched with the speed is an intriguing blend. I mean, teams are going to take note of his measurables at the combine, with the speed, with the wingspan, and with his height.
yep.
Those three, if it's the perfect combination, like I think it's going to be, and we're going to see those numbers come in next week, that's going to allow him to, on paper, teams are going to trust him to be able to match up with anyone down the field and, anybody who it could be wide receiver type.
Yeah. I mean, measurements are going to be huge for this group. I think we're going to see a lot of changes, even to some of the top guys on this list, consensus wise. People could move down, and some of the guys that we've already talked about could move up tremendously because of some failures on other people's parts. So I think measurements are going to be key. And it seems like Siobhan Revel is going to be one of those guys that excels in the combine
Hmm.
type of drills that you're going to have to do.
Yeah.
So he's a guy that I do expect to move up my board potentially, but I really do like my top four. So we'll see if he'll be able to crack it. All
I
right,
think
number
I think
four.
you're gonna see. I just want to
Yep,
say, like, Adam, I think you're gonna see Siobhan's name pop up in a lot of like combine winner articles
yep,
by the end of the week.
yep. And he could be
You're
talked
definitely gonna
about.
see his name a lot more
He
often.
could be talked about in our recap episode after
Yeah.
the combine. So stay tuned for that. All right, number four, Jade Barron, Texas. I wanted to put this guy higher, but I just couldn't with the three guys above him. I originally had him in my top 10 of my big board. I don't know if he's going to be able to be there when we do this in a few weeks. Um, really like him. I know he's listed as a corner and he plays nickel. He reminds me so much of Brian Branch. And I loved Brian Branch out of Alabama. He was a top 15 player in my big board in 2023 when he was coming out. I think he is going to thrive in a nickel role. He's going to be able to go up against that number two, number three receiver in the slot. He's going to be able to go in, stack the box, be great in the run game. And he's a guy that's versatile. He can play in the slot. He can play up on the line of scrimmage as an extra guy going in. He can play outside against your number one corner. He could even play deep as a safety. I mean, he's great ball skills, high IQ player, really physical. I think the size, he's a little undersized at 5'11, 185, 190, I think in that range. But I think he's an absolute animal out there. He can tackle. He's got great, just like he just explodes when he sees the ball coming out. He just explodes at a tackler and goes out and gets him. So really like what I saw out of him. Just missed out on my top three. He will be in my top three because Travis Hunter won't be a corner in my big board. But for this list, he's at number four.
Okay, so my top three now, I do have Benjamin Morrison three. I think he's incredible ball hawk, the skills, the instincts, everything you need to take the ball away. I would like him to be more physical, especially if he's going to be an outside corner at the NFL level. But I mean, the ceiling's there for him to grow into it and clean up some of the limitations. I thought he had issues closing, whether it was on the football or closing on routes, or even closing like, catching up downfield on receivers. And I thought he was a little too aggressive at times. I like him as a ball hawk, but just being a little bit too aggressive, especially on double moves, baiting hard on receivers' double moves. That's going to eat him up in the NFL if he doesn't clean that up a little bit. And like we talked about, the injury concerns, the season-ending hip injury, that's going to be something he's going to have to answer about at the combine next week.
Yeah. So I've got him a little bit higher, so I'll talk about it in a minute. I actually have Travis
Hmm.
Hunter as my cornerback three. Um,
Wow. Okay.
I like Travis. I'm a little bit higher on him than some people. Like in terms of actual grade, I'm a little bit higher on him in terms of his actual ability at corner. But I do think he's still the third best in this class when it comes to actual skill. I think size wise, he's very thin. He's going to have to, be able to showcase that he'll be able
Yeah.
to go up against some of the more physical wide receivers in this league. I don't like his ability in press, and I don't think he has good ability against jams. He doesn't have the good technique there. So I think even though he is still a very, very good corner, I think there are a lot of red flags that pop up when it comes to will he be able to do this at a very, very high level? He'll be effective, no question. But will he be able to guard Justin Jefferson? I don't know. Will he be able to guard Jamar Chase? I don't know. So it'll be really interesting to see what he does. I think a lot of people said going to the combine as a corner was a mistake. I think he's going there
Mm.
to prove himself as a corner
Yeah.
because a lot of people have him as a top 3 wide receiver. Some people have him as the number 1 receiver in this entire class. So I think he doesn't think he has anything to prove at wide receiver. He does it.
Exactly.
So as of right now, he's my number 3, really high on number 2 and number 1. But there is a possibility if he tests well this coming week that he moves up a little bit more. But he's going to be successful. Just will he be a cornerback 1 or is he going to be a cornerback 2? I'm leaning towards potentially being a cornerback 2, depending on where he goes.
Yeah. I have him at my number two. I thought the instincts, I mean, on either side of the ball, his instincts and athleticism are unlike anyone you'll ever see. Top notch, a specimen as a football player, on either side. And the guy never came off the field. We know his motor. He played more snaps than anyone ever in college football. Um, and I just think on defense as a corner, I thought he was as near lockdown as you can be. I mean, I pulled a PFF search and there's 70 corners that played 400 plus coverage snaps. He had the fewest targets among all 70 of them. I mean, no one was throwing the ball at this guy, and for good reason. I mean, even it was 41 targets he had, and he had 7 pass breakups and 4 interceptions, is what PFF charted him with on
Yep.
41 targets. And I thought, he always had been really good in zone coverage. And I want to see more in man. And this past season, I think he improved in man coverage. There's still issues, like you said, with pressing, with jams, and attacking the wide receivers at the line of scrimmage. But I think the vision and the anticipation are just peak at the position for him and kind of speak for themselves. And he's going to try to be proving a lot of people that that's the case next week.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. I think, we already know he's going to be a top 4 player in the pick in this draft, right? I mean, the furthest he falls off this board is the Patriots at 4. He's not making it past that.
Yeah,
But yeah, for me, it's just, his man coverage ability, his technique on the line of scrimmage. And I mean, that's pretty much it. His ball skills are insane. His instincts are insane. He's an elite athlete. He's going to be able to play both ways full time. We don't know, but he's an elite player. And we'll leave it at that. I mean, he's
yeah,
amazing.
and playing both ways, you're going to be able to play him to his strengths. I mean,
Exactly.
you're not going to be relying on this guy to be an every down corner. So you can play him to what he's good at, and yeah, he's going to do it. He's going to be a really good player.
All right. My number 2 is Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame. I really like what I saw out of him in tape. Locked down Marvin Harrison Jr. last year. Completely. He locked down who was the other guy that I was watching? I forget what the other tape was, but he locked down some of the best wide receivers in college football, right?
Hmm.
He's proven his ability to go up against the best of the best, and he is absolutely outstanding in man coverage. I mean, I personally think, they might not have won the game. Ohio State would not have scored on that final drive if Benjamin Morrison was playing. I
No.
Jeremiah Smith is not getting that wide open. They're not throwing that football in that situation because they're not going to be able to beat Benjamin Morrison. Just not going to happen. He's great technique, great length, good ball skills. I think you already mentioned some of his pursuit isn't great. But other than that,
Yeah, closing speed.
closing speed. But other than that, he's going to be able to lock down your team's number 1. I don't care. I'm going to tell you this right now. He's very close to Will Johnson for me, in my opinion, in terms of actually being able to be the number 1 corner. Because if Will Johnson goes out, runs the 40 next week, and he runs a 4.49 or higher, he's not going to be able to play against the best wide receivers in the NFL in man coverage.
Yeah.
He's
Mm.
going to be a system-based wide receiver, or he's going to be a cornerback number 2 against some of the slower wide receivers in man coverage. So
Yeah.
if he does not test well and Benjamin Morrison goes in the combine, his hip injury is perfectly fine. He clears all his medicals, tests well. The tape speaks for itself. He might be better than Will Johnson. He might be. So I really like what I saw out of him. Obviously, there's still more to come, a lot more tape. And Will Johnson obviously had a down year this past season. But I do think he also gained a lot of hype based on the Michigan championship the year before. So we'll see if that
Yeah.
balanced itself out. And, maybe he is that borderline number one corner and maybe he's actually number two, or if he really is standalone cornerback one.
Yeah. I mean, what sucks is both, Benjamin Morrison and Will Johnson, they looked really good, but they both missed time, and you
Yep.
don't know, like it's hard to make that line and that distinction between the two of them in terms of who you're going to want being your top guy, and they're going to have to answer for some of those things and the injuries that they've had. Will Johnson is my number one. Sounds like he's your number one as well.
Yep.
I think he was an impact player right out of the gate with Michigan, and that's a top level program. It's hard to do that day one with that kind of program, especially against the talent that you're facing in the Big Ten. The Big Ten wide receivers are a tough group to go up against, and he didn't allow a single touchdown the last 2 years. And again, yeah, he missed time in 2024, but that championship run the year before, he was incredible for that Michigan defense. Very intelligent, very physical, and he has the legit makings of a cornerback one. Is he going to be a Derek Stingley or a Patrick Surtain right out of the gate being an impact player?
Sauce
I don't know
Gardner.
if he's going or Sauce Gardner. I don't know if he's going to be quite that, but I do think like the team that gets him, like a Jacksonville Jaguars, like he's going to come in and be their number one corner. Is he going to be an immediate top 10 corner in the league? Top five corner in the league? Probably not. But he's still going to be a top 10 pick easily because he is the number one corner in terms of being the guy that would be your number one for a team. And there's teams out there in the first, at the top end of the draft that need a guy like that.
Yeah. For me, again, as I mentioned, I think when you look at him stereotypically, he is a great corner. Good size, good length, good ball skills, good instincts. One downside is top end speed. Does he have that? And I think, also man to man coverage or zone. Is he going to be able to perform at the top level in man to man coverage against the best? We don't know. We'll see. But I think that's why, for me personally, I think he can go as high as number 5 to Jacksonville, as you mentioned. But I
Yeah.
think it's a reach there. Whereas I think if he goes to the 49ers at 11, the Cowboys at 12, the Cardinals at 16, in the 10, or, I'll give Panthers at 8, 8 to 16, 17, where the Bengals are, that range, I think it's good value to absolute steal, right in that range between 8 and 17. I think 5, 6, 7, teetering on 8 and 9 as potentially as a little bit of an overconfidence in that. But if he runs a 4.45 or below, I mean, I think it's justified to get him at potentially number 5, 6, 7, 8 in that range.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on how the board goes and like how these teams, like the Jaguars are weird. I talked about Mason Graham, like keep
Yep.
your eye on him because it seems like they're going to go that direction, but they're always weird. Once they get their GM in, it can change a lot of things. The Raiders are always a weird team too. You never know how to project them. But Will Johnson, it looks like in my mind one of those two teams, but those are the two hardest teams in the entire league to try to predict what they're going to do, and they're right there back to back, and at the 5-6 spot. But
We know
somewhere in
DeBoer's
there,
not
he's
going 6, so
yeah, and you don't know what the corner or what the QBs are going to do.
now we're going to go into some of the honorable mentions here. One guy, notably, both of us left off, Azariah Thomas out of FSU, big physical
Hmm.
guy, could potentially be in that first round conversation. I left off Trey Amos. You didn't. And then just some other guys that are kind of like in that day 2 range would be Darian Porter out of Iowa State, Noel Williams out of Cal, Upton Stout has gotten a lot of top projections out of Western Kentucky. And then there's some other guys. Obviously, you mentioned Jalen Smith. I didn't have him there. Dorian Strong out of Virginia Tech. I liked Mac McWilliams showcase at the Senior Bowl. And then Kobe Bryant obviously got a lot of hype from his performance at the Shrine Bowl. So although
Yeah.
this class is very top heavy, there are some names that you can get in these later rounds that could potentially be good. But I think there are a lot more red flags. We talk about height, we talk about weight, we talk about man to man versus zone with these guys that don't have the higher ceilings, like a Will Johnson, like a Maxwell Harrison, like a Benjamin Morrison, where it is a little bit more of a risk to go and take them in day two. So expect to see a lot of those guys go in round three and into day three because guys are gonna be going after this interior defensive line, after these edge rushers, who are a little bit more higher floor
Yeah.
style players.
Yeah, and I'm wondering how many of these defensive backs, when it's all said and done, actually go this year.
Yeah.
So especially once you get the safety, I think it's kind of potentially the same thing there with the corners. It's very top heavy, and I wonder how many of these guys go in the back end, and that could change things with the free agent market too.
Yeah.
Some of the corners and safeties we have definitely affect some things there.
Yeah. There are a lot of notable names that can in these two positions, corner and safety. We'll talk about safety, I believe, next time. There are a lot of notable names, but just in that bottom half, there's just a lot more red flags that you have to be careful of. I mean, there's going to be a stud that comes out, right? There
Yeah,
always is one or two guys at each position that's going to come out and be a stud. It's just a lot more difficult to predict who that is this year compared to years past. So, don't take this as, you have to get one of these seven guys that we just mentioned, but, it is going to be a lot harder to hit that gem than it usually is. So,
yeah.
all right, that is our top seven wide receivers and corners. Next up, I believe, now these positions we've already talked about it are a little bit more surefire on who's in the top five for the most part. So we're doing top five tight ends, linebackers, and safeties. We're pretty much
Okay.
gonna, go Cole. You're gonna say your 5-1. I'm gonna say my 5-1, and then we're gonna talk about the differences in each of these
Okay.
because I feel like there's gonna be a lot less differences than there might have been in some of these other positions. So
Yeah.
that's what we got next time. And that also frees us up to do a solo running back episode next because that position is stacked and there's going to be a lot of names to talk about.
Yeah. Excited for that one.
So we will see you guys on next Monday for tight ends, linebackers, and safeties.